Singapore, officially the Republic of Singapore, is an island country and city-state in maritime Southeast Asia. It is located about 1 degree of latitude north of the equator, off the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula, bordering the Strait of Malacca to the west. The Singapore Strait to the south, along with the Riau Islands in Indonesia, the South China Sea to the east, and the Straits of Johor along with the state of Johor in Malaysia to the north. The country's territory comprises 1 main island, 63 satellite islands and islets, and 1 outlying islet. The combined area of these has increased by approximately 25% since the country's independence as a result of extensive land reclamation projects. It has the second highest population density of any country in the world, although there are numerous green and recreational spaces as a result of urban planning. With a multicultural population and in recognition of the cultural identities of the major ethnic groups within the nation, Singapore has 4 official languages: English, Malay, Mandarin, and Tamil. English is the lingua franca, with its exclusive use in numerous public services. Singapore's history dates back at least 800 years, having been a maritime emporium known as Temasek and subsequently a major constituent part of several successive thalassocratic empires. Its contemporary era began in 1819, when Stamford Raffles established Singapore as an entrepot trading post of the British Empire. In 1867, the colonies in Southeast Asia were reorganized, and Singapore came under the direct control of Britain as part of the Straits settlements. During World War II, Singapore was occupied by Japan in 1942 and returned to British control as a separate crown colony following Japan's surrender in 1945. Singapore gained self-governance in 1959 and, in 1963, became part of the new Federation of Malaysia, alongside Malaya, North Borneo, and Sarawak. The English name of Singapore is an anglicization of the native Malay name for the country, Singapura, which was in turn derived from the Sanskrit word for Lion City. Pulau Ujang was one of the earliest references to Singapore Island, which corresponds to a Chinese account from the 3rd century referred to a place as Pulau Ujong, a transcription of the Malay name for island at the end of a peninsula. Early references to the name Temasek are found in the Nagarkritagama, a Javanese eulogy written in 1365, and a Vietnamese source from the same time period. The name possibly means sea town, being derived from the Malay Tasek, meaning sea or lake. The Chinese traveler Wang Dayuan visited a place around 1330 named Dan Maxi or Tam Masayak. Depending on pronunciation, this may be a transcription of Temasek. Alternatively, it may be a combination of the Malay Tana meaning land and Chinese 11 meaning tin, which was traded on the island. During the Pacific War, the Japanese invasion of Malaya culminated in the Battle of Singapore. When the British force of 60,000 troops surrendered on February 15, 1942, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill called the defeat the worst disaster and largest capitulation in British history. British and Empire losses during the fighting for Singapore were heavy, with a total of nearly 85,000 personnel captured. About 5,000 were killed or wounded, of which Australians made up the majority. Japanese casualties during the fighting in Singapore amounted to 1,714 killed and 3,378 wounded. The occupation was to become a major turning point in the histories of several nations, including those of Japan, Britain, and Singapore. Japanese newspapers triumphantly declared the victory as deciding the general situation of the war. Between 5,000 and 25,000 ethnic Chinese people were killed in the subsequent Sukching massacre. British forces had planned to liberate Singapore in 1945. However, the war ended before these operations could be carried out. Capital punishment is a legal and enforced penalty in Singapore. The country is one of 4 in the developed world to retain the death penalty, along with the United States, Japan, and Taiwan. Particularly, its use against drug trafficking has been a source of contention with various non-governmental organizations, regarded by some as a victimless crime. The government has responded that it has no doubts that it is the right policy and that there is clear evidence of serious deterrence, and that the law should be looked at upon in the wider context of saving lives, particularly citizens. In 2004, Amnesty International claimed that some legal provisions of the Singapore system for the death penalty conflict with the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. The government has disputed Amnesty's claims, stating that their position on abolition of the death penalty is by no means uncontested internationally and that the report contains grave errors of facts and misrepresentations. Singapore consists of 63 islands, including the main island, Pulau Yujan. There are two man-made connections to Johor, Malaysia, the Johor-Singapore Causeway in the north and the Tuas Second Link in the west. Jurong Island, Pulau Tekong, Pulau Ubin and Sentosa are the largest of Singapore's smaller islands. The highest natural point is Bukit Timah Hill at 163.63 meter. Under British rule, Christmas Island and the Cocos Islands were part of Singapore, and both were transferred to Australia in 1957. Singapore's urbanization means that it has lost 95% of its historical forests, and now over half of the naturally occurring fauna and flora in Singapore is present in nature reserves, such as the Bukit Timah Nature Reserve and the Sunjai Buloh Wetland Reserve, which comprise only 0.25% of Singapore's land area. In 1967, to combat this decline in natural space, the government introduced the vision of making Singapore a garden city, aiming to improve quality of life. Since then, nearly 10% of Singapore's land has been set aside for parks and nature reserves. The government has created plans to preserve the country's remaining wildlife. Singapore's well-known gardens include the Singapore Botanic Gardens, a 161-year-old tropical garden and Singapore's first UNESCO World Heritage Site. Companies linked to the government control much of the domestic media in Singapore. MediaCorp operates most free-to-air television channels and free-to-air radio stations in Singapore. There are a total of 6 free-to-air TV channels offered by MediaCorp. StarHub TV and Singtel TV also offer IPTV with channels from all around the world. SPH Media Trust, a body with close links to the government, controls most of the newspaper industry in Singapore. Singapore's media industry has sometimes been criticized for being overly regulated and lacking in freedom by human rights groups such as Freedom House. Self-censorship among journalists is said to be common. In 2023, Singapore was ranked 129 on the Press Freedom Index published by Reporters Without Borders, up from 139 the previous year. The Media Development Authority regulates Singaporean media, claiming to balance the demand for choice and protection against offensive and harmful material.